groups that have track records of violence and who believe in the ethnic cleansing of countries. That's what's coming back to the UK with this connection.
Our governments have long enjoyed a so-called special relationship, but now white supremacists in the UK and the United States are forging ever deeper ties. ITV News has uncovered a network of far-right groups spanning both sides of the Atlantic.
The white nationalism 3.0 style, because it's very appealing.
Are you a neo-Nazi?
I wouldn't use that label. I'd say I'm a nationalist.
So how are they working together?
They're not getting on planes just to have a chat. I mean, frankly, they could do that on a Zoom call, right? There's a reason that they're spending significant amounts of time together.
And what do they want?
An international white community that, at this point in their fantasies, would retake large parts of Western Europe, other countries, to be an all-white community.
I'm Geraint Vincent, and this is what you need to know. Joining me this time is our global security editor, Rohit Kachroo, who has led this investigation. Rohit, tell us first, who are the different groups in the network that you've uncovered?
Well, I mean, look, there's a bunch of groups in this extreme right-wing space, but the ones that we've been looking at are firstly a group called Active Club England, which we first reported on in February. We exposed some of what they were doing in the UK, which was essentially to draw people in for what essentially looked like fitness clubs from the outside, and they were having these fortnightly sessions in a park in Vauxhall in South London, just a few yards from the headquarters of MI6, in fact. But actually what the training was for, and this became evident in some of our secret filming and behind closed doors, this was training for a race war which they perceived to be fairly imminent. What we're talking about in our new reporting as well, which has been out this week, is a network called Vanguard Britannica, which has similar motives and similar aims. But I guess what's new, because people watching and listening might be thinking, well, that for decades we've had, National Front in the 70s and 80s and other similar groups. But I think what's different here is that these are networks that are beginning to work together more closely, and to cross borders and to cross an ocean as well. And here's a crucial bit: the work that's happening with their equivalents in the US. Now, those equivalents are a bit less secretive out there, and so when we put them all together, we get a clearer sense of where their British counterparts see themselves. And this, frankly, is like the top table of organised white supremacy in the US. What we have been able to reveal is that this British network has, in the last few weeks, gone over to Texas to meet with figures like Thomas Russo and Rob Rundo, who aren't household names over here, but they certainly are to senior counter-extremism officers in the FBI. These are some of the most senior figures driving propaganda and organizing in that space in the US, which is in America is more commonly called white nationalist. And what we know is that these meetings that happened were in part about trying to learn from each other and trying to bring some of their experience and their tools over here to the UK.
Just pin down for us, what exactly are their shared beliefs and intentions?
Yeah. The aims of these groups kind of coalesce around a single narrative, which has always been called the Great Replacement Theory for decades and decades, but is now taking on this new life. This is the notion that there is a sort of organized elite around the world which is trying to, in a sense, extinguish white populations in Europe and the US. And
this is the banner you see at the protest, "You will not replace us."
Exactly. And I think what is fueling their success in parts, and I say success because they're all growing at fairly rapid rates, is in part the nature of our own political debates and the debate around migration. I think people might see figures in this group and have a kind of caricature in their minds of, a thug in a pub, that's not quite what we're seeing.
It's a caricature.
Here. Yeah, absolutely. And here we're seeing people who study history, who have who in some cases are well read. Yeah, those sort of street agitators are still there on the side, but they are trying to kind of piece together an almost like an intellectual argument for their very base beliefs in white supremacy, and you see that in some of the cases that we've been reporting on this week.
So more contact, a more kind of uniform ideology. Mm-hmm. What's their plan? What are they hoping to achieve? What are they going to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, and this is where they are perhaps a little smarter than their predecessors, right? Because in the UK, there is very clearly understanding in some of these groups about where the line of the law lies. And so there are some things that are said explicitly and some things that are kind of said with half-truths or through double speak as well. But primarily these groups believe that a sort of what they call a race war is kind of inevitable. And then there are sections who believe that race war should almost be encouraged because that point is inevitable. So the preparation is kind of the excuse. I think what they're less clear about is whether they are prepared to actually try and instigate that. And the reason is clear, because they know what the law says in terms of the instigation of acts. And we saw that clarity, that sort of sense of this kind of air of maybe not respectability, but acceptability when we were undercover in one of these two groups, Active Club England, late last year, when, at the end of a boxing session, and the person leading the group, as they posed up, said, "No Romans, no Romans." This is the term for the right-wing salute. I mean, that's not really a direction that people usually in the course of their everyday life need to be given, unless there is an instinct to do that. But the reason they were doing that was because they were posing for a photograph. They don't want them to be seen in public, and that's really clear in some of these groups.
So kind of smarter approach.
Yeah,
You've
absolutely.
Part of your investigation, you heard from a woman called Dr. Heidi Byrick from the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism. And this is what she had to say about the scale of the issue right now.
The U.S. is seeing a flourishing of white supremacy, neo-Nazism. There's the group The Blood Tribe, which sometimes works with active clubs, which is a flat-out pro-Hitler. They actually believe Hitler is a god outfit. So it's a very dangerous time. And it didn't help that Donald Trump pardoned many of the people in the January 6th insurrection, because a lot of them came from white supremacist groups like the Proud Boys, militias, and others, which to some extent gave sanction to these organizations. And they're much more open with their activities every single day.
And you already said, Rohit, that they operate more openly, these groups, in the United States for various reasons, I guess, which are to do with free speech, free assembly, and the Constitution.
Exactly that.
What are the UK guys getting from them?
Firstly, I think what they went over for was sympathy, right, in part. What we know is that they gave talks to some of these American groups and these leaders about the situation in the UK. Now, we assume that to mean sort of almost certainly a kind of false analysis about threats to the majority white population. But, it's clear that wherever you look in the world, these are the leading figures, right? These people are very experienced. And at the very least, these British leaders were going over there to see what they could learn directly.
Well, you confronted one of these people.
Yeah.
A neo-Nazi called Matthew Gravel, who's previously worked in Buckingham Palace as a guide, I think. We'll put a link in the show notes to your full report on him and the moment that you confronted him where he lives. But tell me, what is his role? Tell us about the kind of global development of these groups.
Yeah.
And frankly speaking, Rohit, how worried should we be as a result of these deepening connections and ties?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a way, they're the same, and in a way, the border doesn't matter because so much of this is happening online that it actually crosses borders, and so much of this is fueled by the sort of algorithms, particularly on platforms like X, which encourage this sort of divisive commentary. And how concerned should we be? Well, I mean, like it's hard to say with clarity and with honesty at this moment. But we know we can see the US, we can see the example there. Like, I guess where the two sections of the Americans and the British delegates, as they describe themselves, differ is their willingness to be open.
Right.
So they posted a picture, group of the people meeting, around a dozen of them, and the British visitors actually blurred their faces out, including Matthew Gravel.
Right. And just tell us more, Ro, about what Matthew Gravel was doing exactly, because his role speaks to a more organised approach, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, he wasn't doing the boxing and the pull-ups and the press-ups like everyone else. He was in the background, standing behind the camera, taking pictures, taking videos, giving kind of reassurance about personal safety and about the fact that he would blur everyone's face on the imagery. So he was a propagandist. He was the messenger. He was this man who had been spreading these messages even while he was working inside Buckingham Palace. And by the way, Buckingham Palace, we spoke to them about this. They thanked us for our approach, and they said, look, we can't comment on individual cases and security matters. They told us to get in touch with the Royal Collection Trust, which is a charity that works within the palace, physically within the palace, that directly employed Gravel and many of the other wardens. And they said much the same thing. So this was a guy who was a kind of royal historian, in a sense, turned propagandist. And, he wouldn't call himself a neo-Nazi. I asked him this directly. He termed himself an ethnocentrist. But what we've uncovered is that he was a member of two groups, of Active Club England, although he denies that. He says, when I confronted him, that he was never a member. He just took the photos. Actually, what our recordings show is that he was doing that in a very organised way, and that he was essentially their propagandist. He's also subsequently became a member of a group called Vanguard Britannica. He organised weekend retreats, and he was promoting some of their work even while working inside Buckingham Palace.
And the other thing I picked up from your coverage, Rohit, was that the other thing they have in common is that there's some kind of moment coming in the future, some kind of judgment day.
Yeah.
Where they've got to be ready to step up. I'm quoting one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There. And I guess they're looking at the public order situations we've seen. I don't know this. I'm speculating here, but they're looking at situations, the public order situations we've seen develop around the immigration issue, around asylum hotels, and thinking, well, this is an environment, this is an atmosphere that we can capitalise on.
And here's the double speak, right? Because in public, they're simply responding to legitimate concerns about migration.
Right.
But what we're seeing in parallel online is their attempts to actually fuel the narrative during that unrest. And we saw that during the summer after the Southport killings last year, that they're sort of speaking with two mouths. The kind of innocent response to concerns that are out there and the need to prepare ourselves for this inevitable moment. But also online, we're seeing a very clear attempt to actually try and generate that moment. And for people in law enforcement, that's the kind of grey area.
Right.
Are people responding? Are they just innocently preparing themselves? Are they just using their free speech? They might have views that people object to, but are they acting within the law, or is their activity beyond the law? And it's worth mentioning at this point as well that both of these groups that we've been focusing on, Vanguard Active Club England are not prescribed. They're not outlawed as terrorist organisations,
Right.
and that's what they would really fear.
And so have you got a sense of how seriously the UK authorities are taking these people?
Yeah, well, I mean, we heard earlier this week from various government figures, the security minister, the health secretary. Wes Streeting was out yesterday saying, that people like this shouldn't be anywhere near the royal family. I mean, of course, the broader point, which was raised by the security minister, is that the royal family aren't the main targets, even though people might be fascinated by the fact that this guy managed to get a job right inside Buckingham Palace. Yeah. The real targets here are sort of minority communities in this country. There's clear ambition. They're not getting on planes just to have a chat. I mean, frankly, they could do that on a Zoom call, right? I mean, there's a reason that they're getting together, that they're spending significant amounts of time together. And the sense I get from people in the government is that they're watching closely, that they're observing these groups. I mean, agencies like MI5, for example, which now look at far-right extremism, and roughly 25% of the caseload in their counter-terrorism work is from the far right. Which is massively outweighed by the work that they're doing on Islamist terrorism, including groups like ISIS. That's part of the narrative used by groups like this. I mean, really unsurprised by the number of people with similar views who've responded to our reporting to say, well, where are your reports on Islamist extremists? Yeah. We could send them the links, I'm sure, but that response to our reporting is part of this message, which is that there is an elite out there which is trying to silence and ignore you, and in some cases
we're part of. Yeah,
that the media itself is part of, and in some cases almost wants to extinguish. And so yeah, I mean, this is a growing trend, and we saw some of this a few years ago. There's another far-right group, National Action, that was prescribed, and that was a big moment for the government because it was the first far-right group to be prescribed. And my sense is that all of the relevant agencies are kind of watching action like this closely, and it's certainly something that's in the mind of the security minister who commented on it yesterday.
Last question is a personal one as well,
Yeah.
Rohit. You won't mind me saying, because we've known each other a long time, you look knackered. It's taken its toll, hasn't it, this report?
Yeah.
You've done a lot of hours on stakeouts,
Yeah.
confronting some pretty distasteful people.
Yeah.
The investigation has taken months.
Yeah.
Taken a lot out of you.
Yeah.
I know that's not something you worry about, but it's a draining business.
It's draining. This has been really, really, really draining, and also it has for the colleagues who have worked on it. It's there are aspects of this kind of work, this kind of journalistic work that we don't put in the story to try and get to the truth. For a long time we've been kind of sure about aspects of what we've reported this week, but as kind of sure is not enough, and getting to that has been draining.
Getting to certainty.
Yeah, it's been a really, really long path with brilliant colleagues who, whose only objective has been to get to the truth. So yeah. It's been knackering, yeah.
Well done to them, and well done to you, Rohit. Many thanks. As we said, you can watch Rohit's report at itv.com/news and on YouTube. We've put a link in the show notes, as I said. Until our next briefing, thanks for joining us.